Awesome. Here we go. Very glad you're here. We'll have fun. But, you know, we really want to tell it like it is. There's no guilt in the lily. Whatever that is. 20 seconds. From WBUR Boston and NPR, I'm Tom Ashbrook, and this is On Point. Even now, most Americans describe themselves as middle class. But with income inequality on the rise, the middle class is shrinking. These days, it makes up less than half the country. Today, our On Point National Listening Tour is in Atlanta, Georgia, where polls show most residents describing themselves as middle class, when in fact, more and more of the population is clustered at the high and low ends of the income scale, and the gulf between rich and poor is one of the greatest in the country. This hour on Point, we are in Atlanta talking about the American middle class. You can join us on air or online, where this conversation is always on. What's happened to the middle class in this country? In your part of this country, what's still happening in Atlanta or where you are? We're at 800-423-8255. That's 800-423-TALK. Or join us anytime at onpointradio.org or on Twitter and Facebook at OnPoint Radio. We are broadcasting today from the downtown Atlanta studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. We're streaming video of this show on Facebook Live. You can find the video stream at onpointradio.org. Check it out. We're there. You can see us in living color. We've got a great crew of Atlantans with us here today to take on the issue of the middle class, where it stands, and more. Let me introduce them to you. Adria Welcher is here, sociology professor at Morehouse College. She studies race and class inequities and writes about black middle-class families. Adria Welcher, great to have you here with us today in Atlanta.
Happy to be here.
And Greg Williams joins us. He's a mortgage broker, Georgia native, an officer with the DeKalb County Republicans, hosts a weekly radio show on America's Web Radio called Greg's List. We see what you're doing there, Greg's List. We see
Very
that.
clever.
Greg, thank you very much for being with us, Greg.
My pleasure.
And Nan Orrock joins us. She's a Democratic state senator representing Georgia's 36th district, which covers a wide swath of Atlanta. Been in the state legislature for 31 years. Before that, she worked for Nabisco for 17 years. Nan Orrock, welcome to On Point. Great to have you here in Atlanta.
Great to be here, and welcome you to Atlanta. We're so glad to have you.
Well, thank you so much. We get a lot of Atlanta callers. We're very aware that you're here. It's been an amazing year of taking the show out on the road around the country and talking with people, whether it's Charlotte, Tampa, Detroit, Portland, Maine, Milwaukee. We're just in Spokane, Washington. We'll be in Ames, Iowa in just a couple of weeks here. And hearing it firsthand at a time when people are thinking about the country, worrying about the country in ways that maybe a lot of us are unfamiliar with. It's been great to hear the voice of people who are right in the middle of it, and so we're really happy to have all three of you with us today. Adria, you're the academic here. I mean, you know this from that angle. Begin to take us into this. We see reports out in the last couple of years. The latest headline I saw here in the Washington Post saying the middle class is shrinking just about everywhere in America. Now, day in and day out, people may not feel that. But overall, people know what's happened with wages over time, and we've seen the inequality grow. What's the situation, Adria, in Atlanta?
So first, let me preface by saying it's extremely important to understand that when we say the middle class, we don't have a firm definition. So typically when we talk about the middle class in sort of these public settings, we're talking about the idea of income. So we're looking at median incomes. And what's happening is those who are at the bottom are making less money than they've ever made. Those who are at the top are making more money. So as you look at the middle class, which can loosely be defined, I think a Brookings Institute study in 2013 said between 40,000 and 100,000, which takes into no account wealth or anything like that.
But if you look at annual income, wealth aside from them, which is a big deal.
It's a huge deal, particularly when we talk about the middle class and this idea of being able to weather the storm. If we look at our 2008, say, market crash.
Okay, but just look at that sort of general area. What do you see there?
Right, so what we see in Atlanta is those who are on the higher end of the middle class are able to move into the higher end of living. So they become the low end of the upper class.
Okay.
And those who
if
are,
they're lucky, if they make it, if they
they're
move
lucky,
on up. Yep.
exactly, if that is able to happen.
But that's the old American story, or the one we want to.
Right.
We want that for everybody. To
But
be
it's
able to
not
move up.
happening for everybody.
What's happening?
So those who are at the bottom, and I think it has a lot to do with industry, right? The types of jobs that are moving to Atlanta, the types of jobs that are offering higher incomes. Those who are less skilled, who don't have the characteristics of the types of jobs that are making more money, that are commanding more money, they fall farther and farther behind. Their housing becomes lower quality, their education becomes lower quality, and we end up reproducing what we've already had. So that explains to me the shrinkage of the middle class. Those who are at the top are doing better. They're able to jump over. Those who are at the bottom continue to do worse and worse.
The bottom of the middle class.
bottom of the middle
And
class.
the bottom overall.
Right, which I would argue that it's problematic to even define a middle class as 40,000 to 100,000. That's a huge
I've seen
disparity.
some in Atlanta saying 30 to 80. I mean,
Exactly.
The
There's
cost of
no-
living is different in different parts of the
Absolutely.
country. It's funny, Americans still want to say, everybody wants to. I mean,
Everybody.
Some are and are happy to be much better
Right.
off than middle class. Nobody really wants to be poor, but some acknowledge it. But in the main, Americans still like to say, yeah, middle class. But we know that status doesn't have the same sense of stability or ease to it that it
right.
once did, or maybe confidence that it once did. Greg Williams, I mean, your story is an interesting one because you're a mortgage broker here. So that means, by definition, you get into people's finances and you see it really up close. I mean, you have to lay all your cards on the table when it comes to.
We don't have the no-doc loans anymore.
No,
Those
exactly.
are gone.
That's gone. They took a lot of joy with them, or a
lot of houses,
a
too,
lot,
yeah.
lot of houses with
Yeah.
them. Tell us something about your story, your time in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the course of your career here. Are you middle class, and how's your sort of career unfolded, so we can have a sense of that?
Well, I consider, I grew up in upper middle class home. All of the children in our family were destined to go to college. I
Yeah.
graduated from University of Georgia, which
Great.
is a top 5 journalism school.
Yeah.
And go Dogs, beat Florida tomorrow. Just had to throw that
Okay,
in
go
there.
Dogs.
And so, I got into banking after working for a year at the Marietta Daily Journal.
Okay.
And my parents were like, you got to move out of our basement. And I said, okay, I got to make
And
more
you're not
than
going to make a bundle.
I got to
in
make more than
journalism, we know that.
$7.50. I got to make more than $7.50 an hour plus
Okay.
$50 a month gas allowance. So I got into the finance world
Yep.
and just kind of moved from being a retail banker to a mortgage banker,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing it for 15 years. And I got to tell you, the first 2003 to 2007 was pretty good.
That was the
but
giddy
that
time
was-
of no doc
right,
loan, no
yeah.
documentation required.
Yeah, and the
Off
good
we
thing,
go.
I guess, the good thing about me though is I never really solicited that business. I wanted to
Yeah.
I wanted people to have jobs, prove their income,
Yep,
have
good
a minimal
footing.
down payment, and that's probably why I was able to survive the crash and still stay in the industry. Because in my business, we call that A paper or A quality credit,
Yep.
or platinum credit. And
But
so
it
that-
wasn't always easy. There was a time in there when you were driving Uber for a
yeah,
while to
I
make
had
it all hold together.
sometimes
You
you
and a
have
lot of other people
you
doing
have
what's needed,
you have
whatever
to
it takes.
Get involved in the gig economy. I lived in Toco Hills, and I was a client or it was like hair club for men. Not only am I a client of Uber, I'm also a driver. You remember that?
Will
old
I drive
commercial?
you, or will you drive me?
I
Depends
was
on
like,
what time of day
the
it is.
future will all be Uber drivers delivering Amazon Prime packages, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you see it up close.
Yep.
You've lived it directly. When you look at the middle class today, think about how we've understood it over time. Think about it in Atlanta. How's it doing?
Yeah, I will tell you, Nan will be able to speak to this a little bit. The state of Georgia is very active in trying to rebuild some of these jobs. We've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs, and that, frankly, was kind of the where the middle class, the heyday of manufacturing textiles are gone. From the state of Georgia, we do have some automobiles, but what we're seeing now is a film industry that Georgia filmed the most feature films last year, 17. We beat out New York and California, and the government, the state of Georgia, has decided, you know what, we need to actually have production academies going here. We've started a film academy, and instead of importing the jobs from Los Angeles, we're going to start building those jobs. And
You're
these
going
are
to be Hollywood East,
these are-
Southeast? Will that do it?
well,
Will that do it
they
for
call
you?
we call it Yollywood.
Okay, Yollywood. Oh, I like that. But does that bring back
It can.
stability and
Yeah, because here's the thing. Some of these manufacturing jobs aren't coming back. Technology has evolved to a point that, if they do the fight for 15, the kiosks will be, fast food workers will be replaced by kiosks. We're already seeing an automated world. So Georgia and the whole country really needs to evolve and adapt to this new economy. The people studying in college need to look at engineering and science science and computers.
But
and,
Americans have been hearing that for a long time, with respect. And of course, we do need to be at the top of our game in all those fields. But even while we've been told that, manufacturing's going away, but you'll be fine, a lot of people haven't been fine.
Right, because they have not been able to cross-train their careers. And unfortunately, we're seeing that, manifest heavily in the Rust Belt, where the opioid crisis is really set in Ohio and parts of Michigan. And even here in the rural areas, we have our own problems. And we've also seen, I think the city of Atlanta is very affluent, but when you get outside into some of the smaller towns, especially in South Georgia, those cities are really hurting. Those communities that have had their hospitals fold up, and I think we need to reinstitute the spirit of the entrepreneurial spirit a little bit.
There's the GOP guy talking. Nan Orrock, what do you see in your district? You're a state legislator. You have been for a long time. What do you see when it comes to the middle class and its health?
Well, I have a district that takes in 3 of the 4 sections of the city of Atlanta, and then 3 small towns, East Point, College Park, and Hapeville, that are around the airport. And I have, it's racially very mixed, and I have millionaires in my district and people living in abject poverty. Everything in between. And so I see it all. And the truth is that Atlanta is gentrifying. And so I have a sizable portion of my district that feels incredibly threatened by that.
Is it just the bottom that's getting kicked out, which is hard, very hard if you're at the bottom? Is it the middle class too that's getting edged out, shouldered out?
We had one of my zip codes, 30310, had the highest foreclosure rate in the nation in the big downturn.
Crisis, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so people lost their homes right and left. People that I knew personally and never dreamed were in trouble, who are ashamed to tell anybody. They feel it's their own fault, unaware of what the giant scheme of the financing industry had done, and that these plenty of these neighborhoods are targeted because of their housing stock and elderly people who'd been able to have a home all their life, who'd had a factory job out at Nabisco and had a lovely home and foreclosed.
It happened all over the country. It happened to one of the highest degrees, maybe right in parts of your district.
That's right.
Some zip codes there. Nan Orrock, please stand by with us here in Atlanta. Greg Williams, it's great to have you here. Adria Welcher, all 3 Atlantans talking to us today about their view of how the middle class is doing in this city, around this city, in this country. You can join us if you're in Atlanta or beyond. Talk to us. How do you see the middle class doing now, and how do you see the path ahead? There's a lot of talk these days about industry, taxes, where we're going, who counts. 800-423-8255 is our number. 800-423-TALK. I'm Tom Ashbrook in Atlanta. This is On Point. We'll be right back. Can Facebook hear me? Facebook is struggling right now. All right, that's fine. Okay. Facebook is struggling. Good. Thank you very much. We're going to dive right back in here in about a minute. Indianapolis speech was last month. It was September. One, 3, 4.
Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston, Eton, with a line of Grundig shortwave radios that provide access to financial, political, and current event info from around the world in real time, now at Amazon, Harrington, and National Geographic. And Home Advisor, matching homeowners with background check professionals for a variety of home projects, from minor repairs to major remodels. Homeowners can read reviews, compare prices, and book appointments online at homeadvisor.com.
I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point, and we are on the home stretch of our year-long On Point National Listening Tour, today in Atlanta, Georgia, talking about this country right now, and especially this country's middle class, how it's doing, what it's up against, the view from Atlanta, Georgia. You can join us at 800-423-8255 in Atlanta or beyond. How do you see the middle class doing right now? After all the years of wage stagnation, is it still a comfortable place to be? And do you feel middle class? Middle class and up against the wall, middle class and all right? What's working for the middle class and what's working against it in this country, in our economy right now? 800-423-8255 is our number. 800-423-TALK. I've got great Atlantans with us here in the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. I'll introduce them to you again in a moment. A lot of talk on the national stage about the middle class these days. Here was President Trump in Indianapolis last month saying that his tax plan, Republicans moving hard on it now, would be miraculous for the middle class.
Democrats and Republicans in Congress should come together, finally, to deliver this giant win for the American people and begin middle-class miracle. It's called a middle-class miracle once again.
A middle-class miracle. Are you ready for that? Gary Cohn, White House economic advisor, was talking about the middle class last month, about a family making $100,000 a year and how he was speculating they might save $1,000 on their taxes annually under the Republican tax reform proposal. His comments got a lot of attention. Here he was.
If we allow a family to keep another $1,000 of their income, what does that mean? They can renovate their kitchen. They can buy a new. They can buy a new car. They can take a family vacation. They can increase their lifestyle. That's what our tax plan is to do. Our tax plan is aimed to return more income back to hardworking Americans. That's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, that got a lot of attention. Gary Cohn, billionaire. A lot of billionaires in this cabinet, of course, more than ever, talking about a renovated kitchen for $1,000 or a new car for $1,000. I mean, I've got a lot of heads sort of shaking here in Atlanta, but okay. And then one more here, Senate Minority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer. This was at a news conference just this week, going hammer and tongs at President Trump's advertising for claims on the GOP tax plan. Schumer saying, false, false, false.
Untruth one, it's aimed at helping the middle class. Untruth two, it's not a plan for the rich. Untruth three, it lowers the deficit. This plan is a disaster for America.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about all of it. Greg Williams is with us. He's an officer with the DeKalb County Republicans, mortgage broker, lifelong Georgia resident. Adria Welcher is with us, sociology professor at Morehouse College, married to, I think, a pastor here in Atlanta. Maybe a Trump. What are your husband's politics? Are they... Okay, leave it to the Lord.
Leave it to the Lord.
And Nan Orrock is with us. She's a Democratic Georgia State Senator representing the 36th District here in Atlanta, all in the studio. Adria, how about that $1,000 kitchen renovation or new car? Is this cabinet member in touch with what it means to be middle class, what it takes to do things in our economy now?
I think the short answer would be no. It's important to understand that to not be a billionaire, to not be able to say things like, well, I only started my life with $1 million. That is not the experience of the average middle-class American. $1,000 would be great, certainly not for a kitchen renovation. Most of us would probably try to pay down debt, pay off back loans, things that help us survive day to day. We're not changing our lives with $1,000 extra from taxes.
And you know, the data's out there on how much debt ordinary American families are carrying. That's right. Credit cards maxed out. Get another one. Oh, this one will give you free interest for 6 months. Switch this balance over here. And there is and the New York Times had a recent story, you know, a particular family on that. But people are living from paycheck to paycheck,
yes,
and struggling with massive debt. You also got the college tuition, because the education is supposed to be the pathway, you know, to a better life in America. Get your education, and they can't take it away from you. Well, we had 35,000 people drop out of our technical college system when the Republicans in Georgia when the Republicans changed the tuition underwriting that we had in our Hope Scholarship. And we warned them. We said, don't do this. They did it, and in a year's time, 35 people flushed out.
35,000 people.
Yes, 35,000 people flushed out of the technical college system, and people raced to put back in place the tuition assistance that had been there. with hope.
But it just shows you people are kind of on the edge there.
On
Take
the
away a
edge,
little piece, and people can be gone
that's
out,
right.
out of the system of improvement. You, Greg, I know you want to see that. You talked about it. We need a workforce that can really, buff itself up and be ready to go. I'm looking here at a headline from the Atlanta Magazine. Now, this is a couple years old now, but it says Atlanta ranked again #1 for income inequality in the country.
Right.
Do you see that, Greg? Can you see that in this? I mean, that's the data, I guess.
Well, you can. I mean, the city of Atlanta actually isn't that big population-wise. I mean, we have about 450,000. It's actually
With
dropped
millions
over the
more
years.
around.
And we have a metro Atlanta
Yeah.
area of about 6 million.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really see the income inequality. In fact, from the mortgage side of things, we've actually put into programs to avoid the redlining that the senator was referring to earlier about her 30310, which is actually now one of the hottest zip codes in town.
Is that a gentrification heat?
It is.
That's why it's the
It's
hottest.
it's Old Fourth
Yeah.
Ward. It's about 2 or 3 miles from here. It's in a little bit of Candler Park, I guess. It could delve into that. It's definitely City of Atlanta, Kirkwood area. So
Where are those
it's-
people going when they get
well,
gentrified out of that part of town? When they can't afford it, where do
and
they
here's
go?
the thing: when we say they can't afford it, are we saying that all of a sudden their mortgage payment went up? No, because they have a fixed rate. Did their property taxes go up? Perhaps, but they should also be able to take advantage of the appreciation of the land value. I hear this gentrification is this evil thing. So Democrats get mad when property values go down. When property values go up, it's also bad. So I don't get it.
Right.
What would
I
make
hear
them
you.
happy?
Well, just
Well, but
you
maybe
boil
just
it
stick
down to a household. Just an elderly woman living alone on a fixed income has held onto that house, that one asset, and now the property taxes are going up.
That-
Well, I mean,
and
that's
that
tough all
happens-
over the country.
that
When you're
happens-
elderly and the taxes start to bite you, that's tough.
and
It
that-
may be tough here. But let me ask you, Greg, when, because people are moving in there for a reason, and they must be convenient or it's
Right.
attractive. Now, when those residents, go, where do they go? And then what's their relationship to places of employment? I mean, I walking around Atlanta and driving around, you got some traffic in this
Have
town.
fun driving, right?
Oh my
mean,
gosh! I don't know, 8:30 or 9 o'clock last night, and the freeways were still loaded. I was thinking to myself, boy,
Well-
if I had to leave Atlanta and then commute in, how would that be?
There's-
we
a
have
resistance.
We have a massive amount of the northern burbs, especially Cherokee County, North Fulton. I mean, they've had highway access. 75 goes to Cobb, 85 goes up to Gwinnett, and those areas have actually built their own downtowns. There's an edge that's called an edge city. It's a phenomenon that shows where are the people in town going. I think that's a better question. If they make a big take on their equity, they're able to buy another house somewhere else that probably has a lower cost of living. The fact is, Atlanta is one of the fastest growing cities. We're one of the top contenders for Amazon's second headquarters. We've got a burgeoning film industry. So I don't think it's a frothy market, but a lot of the frustration I think from the in-town people is the developers are coming in, and instead of putting in affordable housing, the condo price point starts at $400,000, and association fees at condos can be $600 or $700
Sure.
a month. That's unaffordable for a lot of people, not just working class.
So watch out. We're going to go. I want to talk more about that, how people move around. Callers from Atlanta. Rishi in Atlanta calling. Rishi, thanks for calling. You're on the air with Greg and Adria and Nan.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I just want to say that I just recently moved to Atlanta, and I actually live in the district that they were just talking about. I live in Old Fourth Ward, and I just moved. I just recently got a promotion and moved up in salary grade. But even with my promotion, I still have very big anxieties and fears over how I could even save money or even go, because I still live from paycheck to paycheck, even though I just recently, I'm 27 years old. This is my first time I got a full-time job with a salary and benefits and everything.
Yeah, great.
It's mind-blowing time. Thank you. But it's also like fearful because I don't know where to start or how to start in terms of not only just saving money, but moving forward in my life and getting a house and trying to find a house.
And why is there that uncertainty, Rishi? Explain why you feel that fear or uncertainty about your path. You've got a job, you've got benefits, congratulations. Why the insecurity?
Because I feel like at any point in time, this money can just disappear from me. I'm not really making that much money. I'm still going. My apartment that I live in here in Oak Forward is gone up $100 since the last time I renewed my lease, and it's going to go up another $100.
Right.
And I just can't afford that. And if I try to go and buy a house now, I don't even think I can. I don't know if I'll be able to afford all the extra fees that go into mortgages and all that stuff. I just got this, and I'm afraid that by July, when my lease is over, I'm going to have to move out of the Old Fort Ward and move out of the city and drive across town to be able to go to my new position across town in Buckhead. And I just don't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is all these new things that they're talking about in the government, like tax cut and all that stuff, I don't think it's going to help me. I have a fear that it's actually going to go against me.
Rishi,
especially when
you sound terrific, and we wish you very good luck. And I hope that you figure out a way to pull this whole thing together. But it's not easy these days, and we know that. I want to get one more. Rishi, thank you. They're in Atlanta, just up the pike here, Charlotte, North Carolina. Andrew is calling. Andrew, you're on the air. Thanks. You're on with Greg and Nan and Adria.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I actually, 10 years ago, lived in Atlanta, and I was one of those people in one of those manufacturing jobs in Atlanta, and I can tell you that when the job went away, I left. And, at the time, you're talking about 2,000 people when our plant shuttered.
What kind of plant, if I may ask you, Andrew? What sort of plant?
Auto manufacturer in Atlanta, and, we had about 1,800 employees making over 60 to 70 to even up to 100 grand a year. That's almost 2,000 people not making that money, not pumping that money back into the economy. And I've been away from Atlanta for 10 years, and I don't see the film industry, which I work in media now, but I don't see the film industry. I know they're transient. I know many of those jobs are not local jobs. No matter if they're going to
come in, do a project, and then off it goes.
Well, yeah, it's a traveling circus, and even if you have some of those studios down there, they're not in Atlanta. They're outside of Macon. They're way farther south, outside the perimeter. Maybe there's some jobs closer to home, but I really don't see it. And I know that there was 2 major auto plants in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I know that the north side of town had a GM plant, and they scaled back significantly. You can't lose 2,000 real middle-class jobs with real benefits and talk about that everything's fine or the middle class is fine. I mean, we had cost of living adjustments. So when you talk about wage stagnation, I mean, I can tell you that the job I ended in, I sort of landed on my feet, but I'm making 3/4 of what I was making and no benefits. So
yeah, that's on your feet or on a foot, maybe. Hey, Andrew, I really appreciate your call. I mean, you clearly, and I see the note here, you were in Atlanta for 20 years. You watched, you saw. Adria, I mean, you study this. What are the jobs that are coming now? And, what do they pay? Who's getting them? You hear Andrew, Rishi says, I don't know if I can stay here. Andrew's saying, I don't know if you can really be middle class. What do you see, Adria?
So many of the types of jobs we do have some new auto manufacturing plants. And so we do still have those opportunities. Many are transient. So as a building is being built or something is coming, there's an opportunity to hire, a large number of Atlantans, but that's not long term.
Well, why not? An auto plant, I mean, that's
well,
as good
the
as
auto
it
plant
gets.
is, but the other sort of the jobs that are coming, it's, hey, we need you to help us stabilize this thing, build this building, get this plant set up.
There's a lot of buildings going up in this town. I've seen them just in the last
But it's not the same people that are building all those buildings, and that's not long term. In many cases, it's seasonal.
Okay, so the jobs that are coming, are they middle class jobs? Are they, I don't know, is it corporate headquarters coming here? Who's?
Well, we're hoping to get some more of those.
Well, it's technology. It's driven by the new technology.
Which is education related.
We are blessed to have Georgia Tech, a premier, nationally acclaimed technical university, and the techies that are pouring out of there. We're actually attracting businesses to come downtown because they want to be there where the this new highly trained workforce is. But I'll tell you, on the car plants, there's one big car plant that came into Georgia with all sorts of sweeteners, and they hired not one of those union workers that had been laid off. They're anti-union. Kia down in West Point. Okay. So that's the difference in the job and the caliber and the quality of the job.
That's a difference right there. We're in Atlanta. We're talking about the middle class. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. Greg, Andrew, our caller there says, hey, you know, movie schmovie, it's not going to be the same
Well,
as.
I wanted to circle back
Okay,
to that
yeah,
last year.
I thought you might. I saw.
Fiscal 2017, I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure I had my billions correct,
Okay.
and they absolutely are. It generated $9.5 billion for the state of Georgia, the film industry. That's $2.7 billion in direct spending. Sonoya, Pinewood Studios, where The Walking Dead's filmed, is just slightly outside the perimeter. In fact, the former GM plant that's up in Doraville is turning into a place called Assembly, which is going to be a mixed-use development and have a film studio. So I would push back vigorously against the idea that the film industry
We have
is
Tyler
not.
Perry Studio taking over space at the old closed-down base Fort
But
McPherson.
is Yollywood really going to be the thing that drives this economy?
I mean,
what's-
I don't think
What's
so.
its reach?
It's $2.7 billion.
Okay.
Okay, our annual budget's $25 billion for the state, so that's more than 10% direct spending. That is real jobs. If you walk around Midtown, all of the hotels are bustling. The service industry is bustling, and that's middle class jobs. We had a dinner at Kevin Rathman's on Tuesday night, and our server said he makes $80,000 a year. So that's
Whoa.
the service industry.
It's
That's
a,
middle
it's a
class.
good restaurant in my district.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a very good
Tip-
restaurant.
tip top.
But that's what you have. You have a growing upper middle class. You have, I mean, I've seen the houses go from over my 30 years in my neighborhood. I've seen houses go from costing $20,000 to that same neighborhood is selling houses from $500,000 to $1 million.
Wow.
And it's exponentially gaining. That's not it's not another 30 years. You've seen Old Fourth Ward transform. You've seen you can name these in-town neighborhoods. I also represent the people that are being pushed out because they cannot, the property tax goes up, the rent goes up, and there's no affordable housing. It was discovered that our Beltline that was supposed to build, committed to thousands of affordable housing units, had built, I think, 700. And the head man there lost his job in the wake of that. We've got the Atlanta Housing Authority properties, and deep pocket developers are in a deal to take over that public land and build, again, high-income units. Everybody pushes back about affordable housing, and we're going in a bad direction in that sense.
Well, I mean, inequality means, among other things, money at the top. People will build
Money
for
at
that.
that's
What does
right.
that mean about the middle and the rest? Nan Orrock, please stand by. Greg Williams, great to have you here. And Adria Welcher, we are in Atlanta, Georgia. We're talking about the American middle class. And listeners, you can join us. Is it good to be middle class in the USA these days? It beats being poor, but how good is it? 800-423-8255 is our number. 800-423-TALK. I'm Tom Ashbrook in Atlanta. This is On Point. We'll be right back.
New accusations of sexual harassment or assault by powerful men seem to be coming out daily. Why now? One theory goes back to the Women's March in January.
That was sort of the first inkling that we had that this really was something. Women were upset, and like the old movie, they weren't going to take it anymore.
That story this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News. Okay, here we go, my friends.
Support for On Point comes from College Vine, where college mentors selected from Harvard, Stanford, Duke, and other schools work with high school students through near-peer mentorship to help students discover their passions, build resumes, and start the college application process. collegevine.com/NPR. And Geico, offering motorcycle and RV insurance. More information available on motorcycle and RV insurance at geico.com or 1-800-947-AUTO.
I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. We are in Atlanta talking about this country right now, and especially this country's middle class, how it's doing, what it's up against, the view from Atlanta, Georgia, part of our national listening tour. And you know we have been all over this country in this year. We'll be in Ames, Iowa in a week or two, wrapping up there. But today, right here in beautiful Atlanta, I've got to say it's just been gorgeous the couple of days that we've enjoyed being here, with Adria Welcher. She's a sociology professor at the famous Morehouse College. Greg Williams is with us, lifelong Georgia resident, officer with the DeKalb County Republicans, mortgage broker here. A little Uber on the side once in a while.
Retired.
Okay. Wow, that was quick.
I'm just a passenger now.
Yeah, that was quick. And Nan Orrock is here. She represents, as a state senator, Georgia's 36th district. You can join us, 800-423-8255, 800-423-TALK. Adria, I have to ask you, I mean, Atlanta is famous for a very substantial African-American population that has had a lot of political power here for a long time, and was for a long time, there was an association of Atlanta and a strong African-American middle class. What about the African-American experience of middle-class life, what it means, what it doesn't, how it's trending, Adria?
Mm-hmm. So Atlanta does still have a strong middle class with that broad definition that we referenced earlier. What's become increasingly interesting, though, as we have seen the incomes shift, the African-American population has been hit harder than the majority population, which is typical historically. So when we look at the numbers in terms of the housing loss when the market crashed, you referenced it earlier, Nan, we see that African-American families were disproportionately targeted with those loans and disproportionately impacted by that crash.
Okay.
And so when we look at what it means to be middle class, I think the African-American example is particularly useful in that because the wealth is not there, it is a paycheck to paycheck experience. It is I have a good job. And many African-Americans here in Atlanta have good jobs in terms of their incomes for right now.
But that buffer, that sort of money behind the paycheck.
It's not there. And so when the paycheck is compromised, well,
I mean,
we have to then look at the legacy of discrimination.
And assets accumulation.
Right.
It's just not been afforded to African-American communities.
But African-Americans in Atlanta own homes. We heard about appreciation here. I don't know.
We
what's
do,
your
but
experience
we're not in the
of that?
districts that are appreciating. Some of us are. But broadly, in Atlanta, and we have to be very transparent about that, those of us who are here, Atlanta is a highly racially segregated city.
You mean geographically?
Geographically, people of different colors and ethnicities typically don't live together. And so we were just discussing Clarkston, which is a suburb of Atlanta. It's in DeKalb County.
It borders
next door to your town
so
now.
there's Stone Mountain, Tucker, and then
Right,
Clarkston.
Stone
They all
Mountain.
border their cities in DeKalb County with high minority populations.
Okay. What does Clarkston tell us, Adria?
Well, Clarkston has a high immigrant population, and what we were just discussing was this idea of public transportation. So in many urban cities around the country, we see that they have Boston, Chicago, New York, they have amazing systems of public transportation.
Well, be careful. You citizens in those
It might
cities
disagree.
might
disagree, but at least you
the
can
New
get
Yorkers
everywhere.
But they have them. Compared to Atlanta,
Right.
they certainly
We have
them.
a little record in Georgia, and that is the big secret that up until the last year or two, the state of Georgia invested zippo in the public transit system of Atlanta, and we're the only major city in the country that lacked that support from the state government.
Well, DeKalb County and Fulton County have a 1 penny sales tax, and that, in theory, pays for it. The problem is Gwinnett and Cobb have not wanted to have heavy rail introduced, or they have their own bus systems that are not connected very well.
But what's the problem? People just can't get around.
Well,
can't get to the jobs?
yeah. Put it this way: if you miss a bus, like I take public transport, I'm a Republican public transit lover. Right?
You go.
It's like a unicorn, isn't it? But I take it, and the freedom for me is not having my car, because a happy hour is a great place to go after this. But if you miss a bus in Georgia, you can be 2 hours behind where you're trying to go, and that's where companies like Uber and Lyft have been able to help fill in the gap somewhat. This transportation gap that can connect A to B, because our train runs north, south, east, west. There's no diagonal.
There's been active hostility from the Republican leadership
to be honest about
the Republicans are the ones who push. The Republicans are the ones that push the gas tax.
If the Republicans push small government, less regulation, keep your money in your pocket.
So far, but you still need people to be able to get to jobs.
Well, of course, it's insane to oppose public transit. But that has been very much.
And it's important to understand that the public transportation is a two-way street. So not only are people getting to jobs, people are coming back home to live by you. And so if you don't want certain people living by you, then you are clearly invested in not having them have access.
But Atlanta's far from the only city that has immigrant populations that want to live together. I mean, there's Chinatown in New York, Chinatown in,
or that have to because that's where they can afford to come in, and that works a couple of ways. But we sort of missed the Clarkston example you were talking about.
That's a
if you're an African American or you're a minority homeowner in Clarkston and you've got a home, and you were talking about why wealth isn't built in it.
Well, so with the refugees, Clarkston, very, very diverse population, they don't have access to get back and forth. So there was a proposal with our amazing Mercedes-Benz Stadium now that we're all so very proud about, and our great soccer team that
retractable roof
really disappointed us.
Yeah, but we made it to the playoffs, right? So, but we were looking at the practice field being in DeKalb County, and a big part of that conversation, if we're honest about it, is that it's right here in Clarkston with this border community where there's high pedestrian traffic, there's abject poverty. These folks don't have access to these job opportunities, to these educational opportunities that a public transit system would afford them. So they're not able, they are literally living, I wouldn't even say from paycheck, because many of them don't have jobs.
Yeah. Well, but let's look at the spending, though. Nan referenced so many people over leverage on their credit cards. I mean, isn't that something that maybe we should go back to teaching in high school?
No, it's the way the system is working. It's not
what's the system forcing me to use my B of A card? I mean, how am I going to
Are you kidding? Because those guys that worked at the auto plant and those women that worked at the auto plant or at the Atlantic Steel plant and had union jobs, they're not the ones that they had some flexibility and some options. But when you lose those jobs, when you don't have that, that's how this reality is nationwide, and it's part of how we're pasting together this massive income inequality. It's people living on credit and not knowing how they're ever going to get out of it. And you've got tuition going through the roof for college.
Well, we got callers for the three of you. Paul in, I think Paul with a little Atlanta experience. Paul in Dayton, Ohio. Yes. Thank you, callers. Paul in Dayton, you're on the air. Keep some peace for us here, Paul. What do you see?
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Yeah, I've listened to your guest comments and things like. We live in Dayton. I live in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
I lost my job. I stopped working when I was 57. I'm 64.
What were you doing? Air Force. Okay, and then.
When I retired from the Air Force at age 45 or 44, something like that, 45. Yep. And I went to work for a corporation called NCR Corporation. I'm sure those of you in Atlanta know who they are.
They make ATMs and that kind of thing.
They just moved here a few years ago.
The old National Cash Register. And on one hand, I can understand that's the idea is to move to a big hub and things like that.
No, wait a minute. What happened, Paul? You worked for them and they moved to Atlanta?
I worked for them. Yes, they moved to Atlanta. I worked for network operations. I was a high-tech engineer for NCR Corporation. All of a sudden, I find myself going to India to train my replacement. We've heard that before. I enjoyed the trip, and the Indians are nice, but hey, I like my job, you know?
Yeah.
And then basically, when I get back, I'm laid off, and then very shortly after that, no notice to the state of Ohio, they announced they're going to move NCR Corporation, a company that's been here over 100 years. It was founded here. They move them to Atlanta. You know, everything moves to the big hub cities. What does that leave for those of us who live in the smaller cities? I'll tell you right now, I know that we put in for Amazon here, but I don't see Amazon locating in our area. But I personally believe, you know, who wants to live in a city like Atlanta where everybody has to fight traffic, has to pay higher rent and costs for housing when you can live in between Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio. We have an excellent countryside and ready for building. And you know what they say, if you build it, they will come. This idea that Amazon has announced that they have to be it has to be a pool of people. Well, we can get that pool of people if we get the good-paying jobs here.
Yeah, Paul, we got it. I mean, our Atlantans, when you say that, life in Atlanta is tough, their eyebrows are up a little bit like, hey, they kind of like life in Atlanta. But we hear you. Your job left your place, some to Dayton, some to Atlanta, some to India. What does that leave you feeling as somebody who has been in the middle class, Paul?
It leaves me frustrated, and basically I left that job and I went to work went to work for a school system, and I lost that job because this was during the Depression. Everybody's recession is my depression,
Yeah.
And so that.
Yeah, we know. We know it hit hard there. I mean, and everybody here is nodding at the same time. One time they want to uphold the reputation of Atlanta. I can see that, Paul. But at the same time, they're nodding sympathetically. I mean, what do you hear in that story, Greg? Here's a guy, Air Force, NCR, good job, technical skills. Boom, off to Atlanta.
I see a huge opportunity for some a high-tech manufacturer. We don't want to be making soccer balls anymore. We don't want to be making T-shirts anymore. But there is a huge industry, the space industry. There's a lot of things that are going to be high-wage jobs. And unfortunately, it takes time for this to happen. But it's the natural flow of business that they're going to try to find a cheaper source of to increase their profits. Now, if these companies go out of business, there are no jobs for anybody. I understand that when NCR moved down here, we gave a lot of corporate welfare for that move. So I can understand there's some angst about that.
Yeah.
And Amazon said their request for proposal, their RFP, they basically want the city of Atlanta.
Well, now remember,
you got a whole lot of cities saying, wait a minute.
We would be remiss if we did not address the crisis in health insurance across the nation. I was on the phone yesterday with a constituent for an hour whose Blue Cross Blue Shield is moving out of state, except in counties where they have no competition, and he's cut off, and he had a heart attack, and he's fighting his way back to health. A small businessman who'd relied on being able to buy the Blue Cross coverage. I've hooked him up with our exchange, and we will hope that he can get on there on the Affordable Care Act. But he is absolutely petrified about what faces him ahead in the wake of this illness. And that is a reality of people that have insurance, the premiums going through the roof. And then in Georgia, the GOP here backed away and did not expand Medicaid. 19 states did the same thing. Republican governors. Almost all of the old former slave states do not have Medicaid expansion. And we have a gap of hundreds of thousands of people that have no way to get insurance until that is taken care of. And we left $30 billion on the table of federal money that would come in over 10 years.
What do you all think about what's happening in Washington when it comes to health care now? Of course, we've had a big battle on that, and maybe it's not over. When it comes to the tax cuts that Republicans are looking to push through right now, Adria, how do you see national policy filtering through to Atlanta and middle class, to everybody here?
I really, again, think most of it is harmful to the middle class. I don't think that our legislators and those who are making these decisions really have a good grasp of what Nan has already referenced, of living from paycheck to paycheck, of having health care expenses. A health care crisis arises, that could completely tank a family, completely take them out. And so without actual numbers, these theories are beautiful. I'm a sociologist. I love theories, right? But the practice is what's missing. And so I like the number crunching. I like the conversation. But when we look at the Affordable Care Act, which I call it by that name instead of Obamacare in case there are any confusions about the connection. When we look at the Affordable Care Act, it was an effort. It is an effort to try to provide this equalization to as many people as we can. We can't just repeal it because we don't like the president that was in office when it came to be. And that's the narrative that I feel is happening, and that is problematic.
We're looking at the situation in Atlanta, looking at the middle class. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. Greg, are you optimistic about, let's say, the tax cut plan here? You've got the Republicans saying this is for the middle class, but then you've got a lot of people crunching the numbers saying, oh, wait a minute, the benefit's going to go very much to the top of the earnings.
Well, what we have to do is modernize our corporate income tax structure. It's not a myth. We have $2 or $3 trillion over sees that doesn't want to come home yet because they don't want to pay a 36% tax rate. The small business owners.
You mean they're
who-
tax dodgers? My gosh.
No, they've made this money in other countries. It's called
But do you-
multinational companies.
But do you
It's called
see,
big
we're
business.
talking about middle class.
Yeah.
Do you see it working ultimately for
Yeah,
the middle
absolutely.
class?
Because imagine if we said, to speak to the previous caller, what if we said, look, you can bring this money back to Ohio, but you have to invest it here. That's the way that it's a tax-free holiday. What if we did something creative like that?
Well, we'll see.
Where,
We'll see
where
what
we
they
said,
actually
you
propose.
have to show that the money you're bringing back home is not just going to golden parachutes, but it's going to invest in active infrastructure to enhance your company and hopefully grow it. If you say
Again,
you,
that
if
might
you-
be great if that's what
If you
happens.
say you need it to grow, then well, I'm saying it hasn't passed yet. That's something that we could look at doing. So I would absolutely support American companies bringing home American dollars and reinvesting it right here.
What do you see about the direction of federal legislation, the federal push right now, Nan, when it comes to the middle class in your constituency?
Well, I mean, the numbers are out there, and it's a matter of fact, two different narratives. The Republicans say this is the best thing since sliced bread, and it's going to transform our national economy, and everybody's going to have more than a chicken in a pot. And and the numbers don't uphold that. That's just not the case. And you saw that all those New York and New Jersey Republicans voted no in the House on the
Well, that's
tax
because
bill.
their taxpayers aren't going to get to deduct their high state taxes there, and they don't want them hit with that.
That's well, exactly right. Exactly right. That would be very harmful to their constituents. And so the idea that the complexity of the U.S. tax code, that you're going to ram something through with Trump at the head of it, and in 6 weeks have it on his desk before Christmas, it's utter nonsense. It's a bad way to make policy, and there will be incredible ramifications. This same crowd has pushed all the productivity that's been increased productivity in our economy has the wealth has gone to that upper 20%, 20 to 10 to 5%, and other people are going down. We've got the CEOs earning 400 times more than 300 times more than the people that work for them.
That part is hard to argue. Those numbers are there. What we do about it in Atlanta and elsewhere around this country is going to be fascinating in the years ahead. I mean, people have struggled since the Great Recession. You saw that in the mortgage business. You've seen that, Adria, with all kinds of communities, African-American community here in Atlanta, and you, Nan, of course, in your constituency. You all are so great to sit down with us today and talk through for a lovely hour here what you see. Nan Orrock, thank you so much for being with us
It's
today.
a pleasure. Thank you for bringing this to Atlanta.
Greg Williams, wonderful to have you with us.
Yeah, I've enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for the panel today, guys.
Such a pleasure. And Adria Welcher at Morehouse College, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks
Terrific
you
to
all.
be in Atlanta. Thank you, Georgia Public Broadcasting. I am Tom Ashbrook, and this is On Point. Goes fast.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and NPR.